So this next section is going to talk about curriculum mapping. And the first thing I'm going to do is explain how curriculum maps fit into the overall assessment logic model that we've been using throughout this course. So you have your mission, then you have your institutional learning outcomes, then under that you have your program outcome learning outcomes. And the idea is each of these, the logic model is each thing below needs to prove that thing above it was achieved. Now, what the curriculum map does is it's a document, usually a table, that shows the linkage between program learning outcomes and course learning outcomes, and also courses usually. So the syllabus usually shows the linkage between the course learning outcomes and the unit learning outcomes. And then, you have these assessments. But one thing that's really important to realize with curriculum maps is that generally on most curriculum maps you have signature or summative assessments that are foundational. So that's really your evidence that you're pointing to say this program learning outcome has been achieved because this student submitted this major project in this course or took this major exam in this course that's relates to that. A lot of times people will write program learning outcomes just to have something, but then they don't actually have an assessment that ties to it, and that's problematic. So some of the goals of a curriculum map: you need to demonstrate alignment. You also can tie in general education and institutional goals. Show where and how particular outcomes are expected, taught for, and assessed. As I mentioned, you use backward design. If you have course prerequisites, you can do that. I'm providing a simplified model. I generally design for degree completion, where there aren't as many prerequisites, but you can do that in a curriculum map. You can identify gaps in the outcomes. That's part of the purpose, is to identify those gaps, and then you would revise it before you finalize your curriculum map. You can also do sequencing in the curriculum map. It can be used as an advising tool for students to show them pathways, and generally it's incorporated in degree program reviews, and it's a key tool for institutional improvement. So as I mentioned, signature assessments should be embedded in courses. They shouldn't be separate. They should be aimed at measuring a program learning outcome as well as course outcomes. And often degree programs will have a similar rubric or a similar exam, depending on the design of the program. Now, this is the process for mapping curriculum. You're going to, in the last lesson, you identify the program learning outcomes. And then the first part, you're going to try to figure out what courses are going to map to these program learning outcomes. And then within those courses, you're going to design signature assessments and assignments. And in some cases, you will have various levels. So you may introduce a topic, but they won't have mastery in the first time. And then later you might have mastery or final assessment. And then you're going to create a matrix. Then you're going to use the matrix to identify and fix gaps in outcomes, assignments, and assessments, and make sure that things are scaffolded. Basically what that means is that before students do the really hard stuff, they are, build up to that. So this is a curriculum map example where you would just list the courses on one side, the outcomes on the other, and then for each course you're going to show, okay, this is introduced, it's developed, and then the last one would be mastery, and mastery would indicate you have some sort of signature assessment. Curriculum maps are hard to do right. They're easy to do, they're hard to do right. So you want to make sure you have all your outcomes in a logical order. I think the number one thing is making sure that all your outcomes, I've seen curriculum maps that are developed and they have all their courses, they have all their outcomes, and then there's a bunch of holes where students could go through the program without achieving all the outcomes. And the whole point of it is to prove that they've achieved all the outcomes. The other thing is sometimes you'll have courses that don't address at least one outcome. If that's the case, then maybe that shouldn't belong in your degree. Maybe it should be related to a general education outcome. and you can also use this to identify. Sometimes I've designed programs and I've realized an important outcome only had one course, whereas a not important outcome had 4 or 5 courses that were focused on it. So making sure that you have the right weight, and and consider electives and prereqs. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to kind of walk you through some sample outcomes and sample curriculum maps. So this is where the part of your research that relates to courses is going to tie in. So you have this template here, and you did your research for comparable programs, and the top part of that was supposed to look at courses. And one of the key exercises here is you're going to try to line up the courses so that you can see what courses other institutions are offering that are similar. For example, in our nonprofit management program, I pulled together all these different nonprofit management programs, and then I saw, okay, almost everyone has a human resources course, everyone has a fundraising course, everyone has a nonprofit financial accounting, everyone has something on leadership, and everyone has something on nonprofit administration and board governance. And then I identified areas, okay, these are things we have that others don't. And then I realized that program development is something that almost everyone has that we don't have. And I need to think about, do we want to add that in? In our case, we didn't. We did the same thing with our addiction counseling, where we did research and we looked at a lot of different programs. And then out of those programs, we had our initial list of courses that we thought we were going to offer, and then we identified medically assisted treatment and psychopharmacology and crisis and trauma counseling as things that we might want to add. So we also use this to try to standardize our course names. I think that can be a useful function. So one of the things that you will do is, so you'll build your course list here, and then down below, so you're going to compile all your courses from all these sources, and you're going to try to sort them, and then you're going to use that to go into your curriculum map. So in the last exercise, you should have developed your outcomes, and then you're going to have your outcomes go up here, and then here you're going to add courses. Now I did 10. I think it's better to keep this simple, do it as a certificate or as a degree completion program like I've done. You could do 15. You could have concentrations if you want, but then you can add these here. And what you're going to do once you get the list of courses, so the first task is kind of getting your list of courses, then the next task is going to be going and putting in, and I use the word assess rather than master, but introduce, reinforce, and assess. And in this case, there's actually only 2 outcomes. It was a 12-credit program, so it made sense to only have 2 outcomes. So our associates in ministry, we had, this again is a very simple program, and we only had 5 required courses, and each one had a signature assessment, and then people could pick from some electives. Now, with our business program, it was more complicated, and then we had more outcomes, and then we also had concentration. So within the concentration, part of how we did that is we put an outcome related to the specialty, and then we tied that in with the concentration. So what you should do for this assignment is fill in all the courses, then figure out which ones are going to be just introducing it, which ones are going to reinforce, and which ones are going to have a signature assessment. And and that's it. Thanks.